So let's now look at statement 5. So as we saw, in our last class, in the last year, the topics for chapter 5, some of it can be really, I guess, pun intended, very esoteric, very kind of hard to penetrate, because in part, the details of Vajrayana practice can be very complex. And part of the reason is Vajrayana, especially, well, in general, Vajrayana is in fact very much based on the Abhidharma. Yeah, so Abhidharma is generally classified as a Hinayana level set of teachings. But in the early, kind of literally the meaning of Abhidharma is higher Dharma. Higher Dharma, Abhidharma. And Abhidharma, before the rise of Mahayana, before the explicit kind of appearance of Mahayana teachings, Abhidharma in early Buddhism is seen as the distillation of the wisdom of the Buddha. The wisdom of the Buddha is evident in all the different teachings, in the different sutras, and the different teachings found in the giving of the precepts of training, so the Vinaya. So the Buddha taught to various people, various disciples, with various circumstances and situations and conditions. And all these are recorded in the various sutras found in the Sutra collection. They are also found in the various texts found in classified under the Vinaya collection. And the third collection is known as the Abhidharma. So collectively, they're known as the three collections or the three baskets. Tri Pitaka. Pitaka is like a basket. It's basically, it means a collection. The Tri Pitaka. So then there in the classification of the Buddha's teachings in the Tri Pitaka, or the three collections, Abhidharma represents, contains what's accepted in early Buddhism as the quintessence of the Buddha's teachings, as in the Buddha's wisdom is now, you could say in a way, extracted from the particular circumstances and situations scattered throughout, right? All the sutras and the different Vinaya texts, and distilled into kind of no story. So Abhidharma, for example, there's no narrative in those texts. It doesn't say, oh, at one time the Buddha was this place, he was talking to this person had this problem, and then he gave this solution, and then they had a discussion. No, the Abhidharma is just, kind of straight up all the kind of details. So in early Buddhism, Abhidharma is seen as, the quintessence of the Buddha's wisdom. So in the Abhidharma, then, there's all these details, all the, we might even consider like hair-splitting details. So like an analysis of matter, all the different aspects of matter, analysis of mind, all the different categories of mind, and derivatives of the main mind, right, into mental events, division of things, division of mind into mind and mental events, and which type of mental events are always present, and which type are only present in a particular moment, and so on and so forth. So all these very detailed categories. So analysis into like the 5 aggregates, the 6 senses, the 6 sense consciousness, the 6 sense objects, the 6 sense bases, then like the 37 factors of enlightenment. So all these categories, right, they were taught in the Abhidharma. What happens in Vajrayana is Vajrayana builds itself upon the Abhidharma. So in a way, like some scholars argue, and some lamas, teachers also say, that without having at least a general understanding or exposure or education in the broad categories taught in the Abhidharma, it's actually very hard to appreciate and to understand how Vajrayana works. Because Vajrayana is built on the basis of Abhidharma. Yeah, so when, for example, so in Vajrayana, when we say, the deity arises after the 5 elements, after the palace has arisen, and the palace arises standing on top of the 5 elements. So Vajrayana text will just say things like that, and if you didn't know what the 5 elements are, which you have to learn from the Abhidharma, you'll be at a loss to even know what to think, what to visualize, and what is the meaning of that visualization. So in extensive sadhanas, practice of deities, it will say that like first you have to visualize like the space mandala appearing. And the space mandala has this shape, this color. All that information again is found in the Abhidharma. And Vajrayana texts rarely go into teaching you Abhidharma because it assumes that you already know your Abhidharma. So it just says, the 8 pillars of this palace are the 8 whatever, right? And you're supposed to know that whatever, what they are. Because we already learned that in Abhidharma. Yeah? So if, the material covered in this chapter 5, is difficult for us, they are difficult, they can be difficult for various reasons, but at the most basic reason, I think, is because most of us are not exposed to the Abhidharma. Then you say, well, how come you don't teach the Abhidharma? Well, first, I don't think you will be interested in the Abhidharma. Because it's very detailed. If I were to teach the Abhidharma, which I don't know if I have the ability, but if I were to teach the Abhidharma, all of you, first you need to have the translation of the basic Abhidharma text, and then you will have like different colored pencils and highlighter and notes, and you'll be like, matching 7 of this. These 7 is part of the 3 over here. This 3 is part of the 8 over there. All of that. So then what is the Abhidharma? The Abhidharma, in a way you can say, is the Buddhist reframing of what is this world. Yeah, so we have our own cultural, historical, secular or non or whatever view of what this world is, both externally and internally. So we have our own ideas. The Abhidharma is the ancient Buddhist reframing of, kind of representing what is this world. So for example, like the mandala with Mount Meru in the middle, right? 4 continents on 4 sides, that is from Abhidharma. So part of the reason we might not find the Abhidharma to be so captivating is because we have more trust in kind of modern scientific categories of what this world is. And maybe for good reason. I'm not saying, let's not turn it into a situation of like, deniers of, if people ever got to the moon, and, there's all these conspiracy theories these days about, oh, people never got to the moon, it's all staged, it's fake, and there are even like the people who believe that, like the world is flat, that it's not round, and, I don't know, it's crazy times, So there's good reason, I think, like most of us trust the kind of contemporary presentation of what this world is, at least the external world. The inner world, I don't know if I trust so much yet, this kind of contemporary analysis. That, I think, the main part of the Buddha's teachings is this inner science, right? But this inner science never did not exist like floating in nowhere. This inner science always existed together with the outer explanation. And so the Abhidharma will have the outer explanation of all these different categories. Yeah? Including like in the Tibetan Indian medical tradition that talks about like this body and all the energy patterns and channels, and so that's also found in the Abhidharma, like the different winds, the downward moving winds that expel things from the body, bodily byproducts that are expelled is through the proper functioning of the downward moving winds. Wind here is wind energy, a type of energy that has the metaphor of wind. It's not like, not that wind. Then the life-sustaining wind, then all-pervasive winds. So all these categories, again, they are found in the Abhidharma. Yeah. So one reason we will find the Vajrayana material when we go into details to be challenging is because we are uneducated in the Abhidharma categories. And so that's challenging. Then another level of challenging is, of course, by definition, Vajrayana teachings are self-consciously and deliberately vague and unclear. Deliberately vague and unclear, because it emphasizes the necessity of receiving these teachings from teacher, student, teacher, student. And properly qualified teachers who were at one time devoted students, who studied with properly qualified teachers, and so on and so forth. And therefore, in somewhere it says, that Vajradhara conceals some of this information. Not out of stinginess, not out of favoritism, I'm going to conceal it, and I'm just going to give it to those I like and not to those I don't like. But Vajradhara conceals because it's not a subject that can be just kind of generally put out there. It's seen to be inappropriate and not helpful. So only when the time is right, when the conditions are right, then that information is imparted in a way that will be useful and helpful to the person. So part of it is the Vajrayana material is deliberately self-concealing. So that's another reason, we'll find it a little bit tough. Yeah. Then final reason it's tough is because, well, according to Kyopa's explanation, it is truly and truly meant for bodhisattvas of the 8th bhumi and above. The true entering of Vajrayana practice is when we have arrived at the 8th bhumi. Now, of course, Kyopa Rinpoche doesn't say, there was another view, also a popular view, which he also rejects, which is to say, don't touch anything of the Vajrayana until you are 8th Bhumi. That he also rejects. Right? He says, you don't need to, and in fact, you should not wait until your 8th Bhumi. In fact, you should practice all 3 yanas right from the get-go. In fact, I think that's really his view. You should practice the teachings, techniques, all right from the beginning. I mean, not all of it, but basically, you don't go about dividing, oh, this is Hinayana, this is Mahayana, this is Vajrayana, I'm only doing this and I'm not doing that, I'm doing that, I'm not doing this. You know, he's like, no, that's not how it works. Don't, divide them so rigidly into this, and that. It's like whatever method, especially when the guru, with the guidance of teachers, whatever method is appropriate at that time, you practice that and understand that they are all an integrated whole. Yeah. So on the other hand, he also says that. But then again, within that context, he says, you truly and truly, not only faking it until you make it, you only make it to truly the Vajrayana level when you're on the 8th Bhumi. The 8th Bodhisattva level. A very advanced level. That's when you truly actualize Vajrayana. Before that, we are kind of training, getting glimpses, habituating, and all of that. He says that's also necessary. He says it's not skillful to just say, oh, I'm now just Hinayana, so I'm just going to stick to Hinayana. He says then it will take forever, if not impossible. So anyway, here, let's come to statement 5. People claim that since the stage of cultivation, so here, just to remind everyone, Sobich, he prefers to translate Kirim, Kirim and Zorim. So in Tibetan, these are the 2 stages of deity practice, especially deity yoga explained from the highest Yoga Tantra level, or unsurpassed Yoga Tantra level, that there is Kirim and Zorim. There are the 2 stages. Literally 2 stages, but in the explanations that we're going to hear more and more, it's really, you could say, 2 aspects. Kirim is often translated as generation stage. Zorim, completion stage. Here, Sobish prefers cultivation. Stage of cultivation. Robert Thurman prefers creation stage. I'm starting to like, the translation creation stage because it emphasizes the importance of creativity in my mind, at least in English, but not creativity that is, completely just up to you to make it up, but the notion of like, it involves effort, but then effort that is not like just like hard work effort, but creativity. So I like that English word, creation stage, as in you are creating. But then of course, when we read the details in this chapter, we'll see how it's not literally creation as in you are making something that is not there. In fact, this statement here addresses that issue. The issue is here. People claim that since the creation stage imputes what does not exist, it is complete conceptualization. Meaning the prevailing view is that as important and as necessary as the creation stage is for Vajrayana practitioners to practice, ultimately that belongs to what is known as conceptualization, complete conceptualization, meaning it still involves relative truth. And the reason is, they say, because in the generation stage, you are imputing, meaning you are projecting with your mind that which is not there yet. So this is based on, like, you think, oh, one face, 4 arms, wearing bracelets, anklets, crown, and you're thinking, oh, I'm imputing what is not really there. And therefore, it says here, it belongs to the level of complete conceptualization. Complete conceptualization is a technical term. It's one of 3 levels of reality, which is explained in the mind-only school, the mind-only tradition. And we'll look at that very soon. So here, Kyoba's statement is, the creation stage is the absolute nature. And absolute nature is also a technical term from the mind only. Those 3, I said, the 3 natures, they call it. So there is the complete conceptualization nature, there is the absolute nature, and there is the dependent nature. Kyoba's statement and the opposing view, they both contain 2 of the 3 natures taught in the mind-only tradition. The mind-only tradition analyzes phenomena, analyzes reality into what they call the 3 natures. They say there is the dependent nature. In that sense, it's sort of like the neutral nature of things. Meaning the dependent nature is neutral in that it's almost like, you could say, like Madhyamaka would say, emptiness. It's neutral. And because it's neutral, it also then provides the ability for it to then be experienced as conceptualization, meaning defiled, or pure, meaning here absolute nature. So the dependent nature is neutral. The conceptualization nature, complete conceptualization nature, is defiled, and the absolute nature is pure. So here, Kyopa just say, no. Creation stage is actually based on, or is, the absolute nature. It is not. If you think the creation stage, its principle and its practices is about the defiled, complete conceptualization nature, you don't understand creation stage practice. Now, I think this statement, even though, of course, mainly he's addressing, right, you could say fairly kind of esoteric, fairly academic, it seems, right, discussions, but I think it's very, very relevant to how we understand creation stage. I think even though we might think, oh, creation stage, it's the Buddhas, but I think on some level, we still think, oh, this is all just made up. Yeah, I'm just like doing like Jedi mind tricks on my own mind. To trick myself into believing that, I am Yoda. And one of these days, maybe I'll become Yoda. But I'm not really Yoda. I'm not really a Jedi Knight, I'm just pretending. That is really, what is being addressed here, If you think that you're just pretending, then you don't understand. You don't understand what the absolute nature is. And you don't understand the method that is involved. creation stage. Yeah? So before we go on, let me pause here, drink my coffee, and see if you have comments or questions.
May I express what my understanding is of this discussion to see if I understand it? Okay. The Jigten Sumgan is addressing the fact that other people are saying that since we're imagining these deities and so forth,
Yes.
that they don't exist, and we're creating them with our concepts.
Yes.
So that violates the idea of not being conceptual. And Jigten Sumgen answers by saying, well, the deities that we are invoking are primordially established.
Yes.
We are identifying things which already exist.
Exactly.
So we're not fabricating anything. These are
Not
not mental
fabricating.
fabrications. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So the others will say, no, we are fabricating. And the fabrication is like a skillful means or a method to bring about a certain result. Yeah, so these are not people who oppose Vajrayana, at all. But these are people who do practice Vajrayana, do practice creation stage, but then they say, but it's just a kind of a trick to trick yourself. To trick yourself out of samsara so that, you can become Buddha. But Jigten Sumgen is saying, no. That both the principle and the practice of the creation stage is based on an understanding of the absolute nature. And it is the absolute nature, or as Larry, you say, it's primordially established. That means it's primordially present. Even if you feel like kind of clumsy and artificial, but that feeling of it being clumsy and artificial and, and then especially for many of us, right? You feel like, well, I didn't grow up in that culture. Like all these description is really kind of interesting, but on some level really kind of weird. Yeah. For some of us, it's like very interesting, right? Because we're tired of like the symbols we grew up with. So we're like, oh man, this is so exciting, But then for some of us, it's like, yeah, man, this is just so weird, I can't wrap my head around it, right? So it's understandable, especially, yeah. So putting aside, right, the historical debate or the historical situation that Kyoba Rinpoche was addressing, made the statement. Yeah, probably some of his, again, remember all these statements were made, right, in a day-to-day context. He might be walking around, some students are debating, and he says, no, it's not like that, right? And then Sherab Jungne wrote it down, right? But putting that aside, right, taking now to our times, you can say, we can sympathize with the opposing view. That maybe as we are only willing to go as far as, that the creation stage is in a way made up, but it's a skillful made up that the Buddha gave for us to get rid of certain confusions that we have. That really represents like the opponent's view. And if we're honest about it, we will say, oh yeah, we agree with the opponent. But Kyoba Rinpoche says, no, you have to, deepen your understanding. You have to look in clearly to see how actually the creation stage is not about making up things that don't exist. In fact, he will turn it around and say, what we have habitually considered to exist, that truly don't exist. In a different discussion, this was something that Andreas, director of Guatemala Tibet House, shared with me. His main study focus right now is in the works of one of the greatest Drukpa Kagyu masters called Pema Karpo. Pema Karpo is great, not just according to Drukpa Kagyus. All Tibetans, like, oh, Pema Karpo, great, figure. He's sort of like the great thinker, master of Drukpa Kagyu. So in Pema Karpo, in his discussion of absolute truth and conventional truth, right? Everybody talks about the two truths. Yeah. Then basically no arguments about absolute truth across all traditions. Everybody agrees. It's inexpressible, it's the blah, 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 right? Because it's the absolute truth, how are you going to argue about that? Nothing to talk about. So the debates are never, on the level of what is the absolute truth, They'll always say, oh, it's inexpressible. Yes. It's beyond thought, beyond concept. Okay, great. Then it's the relative truth, is the conventional truth side, there's lots of debate. Yeah? Exactly how truthful is relative truth, right? Debates like that. And what is relative truth? And is relative truth all completely erroneous? Or there's something about relative truth that has some value, right? So then the division into pure and impure, or rather mistaken and unmistaken relative truth. We already come across these terminology, these terms. Earlier in one of the Vajra statements, it says, even mistaken relative truth can have consequences, right? Remember that? Kyoba Rinpoche said. So the commentary gave the story of these monkeys who thought that the moon has fallen into the well, and then a great panic arose, and they tried to, bring the moon out of the well. And so they formed this monkey chain, holding hands and lowering, the monkeys down to the well to bring the moon up. And then some accident and they all fell into the well and they all died, kind of a violent story. So that is given as, how even a mistaken relative truth produces consequences. Yeah. So it's about this. So anyway, in our context, Jigten Sumgön's way of talking about what is mistaken relative truth and what is unmistaken relative truth, he says mistaken relative truth is the kinds of relative truth that contradicts the principle of cause and effect. Unmistaken relative truth is the relative truths that we believe in, that we operate with, that we kind of like move around in with correct understanding of cause and effect. So no surprise, Jigten Sumgön is very concerned about this issue of cause and effect. For Pema Karpo, and so it was in this context I was explaining this that Andres shared. He said, in my readings of Pema Karpo, he says that the way he divides into what is mistaken relative truth and what is unmistaken relative truth, he says mistaken relative truth is the mountains, rivers, great earth, houses, valleys, sun and moon that we perceive habitually. It says all those are mistaken relative truths. The unmistaken relative truth is the mandala, the palace, the jewel trees, the armlets, anklets, crowns, silks of the mandala of Buddhas. Yeah, so Pema Karpo would agree with Kyoba Rinpoche's kind of here, and like, no, this is not made up. The creation stage is not something made up. So according to Pema Karpo, if we walk around experiencing our habitually experienced world, and is still under the power of that, then we are following mistaken relative truth. But if we're able to experience where we are, who we are as Buddha and Buddha field, then it's unmistaken. Still relative truth, but unmistaken. Not erroneous. Other questions or comments or clarifications?
Dr. Lai, I had a question. Just going back to the Abhidharma.
Mm-hmm.
Was that like a composed text? Is there a composed text that was
Oh,
written
yes,
at
of
some
course, of course.
later, like much later, like 8th century, 9th century, or like
No. Much, much earlier. On the BC end of things.
on the BC end of things? Okay, so
Yes, it's
early.
from
Okay,
early Buddhism.
okay, okay.
I mean, historically, of course, if you ask a traditional Buddhist Lama or Buddhist teacher, they say, oh, no, the time of the Buddha, he taught this, you know.
Yeah.
And so according to the usual story, it said, in fact, the Abhidharma was taught by the Buddha when he went up to teach his mother at the heaven of the 33. Yeah, so which every year we commemorate his coming back down from the heaven of the 33, Labab Duchen, in some usually around November. So it said that when the Buddha was up there for 3 months, he was teaching the Abhidharma. And that's why when he passed away, right, according to the usual story, that when he passed away, right, in the early sources, there's no mention of Abhidharma. So this is one way they explain why. So because he taught only to the gods. So it was later that the gods brought this back to the human realm. Yeah, this is accepted by the Theravada tradition, by all Buddhist traditions, that the Abhidharma was taught to the gods when the Buddha went up to the heaven of the 33 for 3 months to teach his mother. And all the gods gathered there. And then that teaching was brought back into the human realm at a later time.
Thank you.
In the Theravada Pali canon, the Abhidharma has 7 divisions. The texts are organized into 7 main kind of texts, 7 main sections. Many of them are translated. You know, if you go to some of these websites, you know, I provide some of the resources in the Drigong Dhammakirti resource page. Includes some of like Sutta Central is one of the sources that I like for the translation of Pali text. Dharma Talks by Thanissaro Bhikkhu is another good site for a lot of the translations of the Pali texts. Are freely available if you want to have an idea of what the Abhidharma is. Then later, of course there's also Abhidharma texts preserved in Sanskrit, which was then translated into Chinese, translated into classical Chinese, translated into classical Tibetan. A couple of years ago, maybe, or last year sometime, Wisdom Publication published a one big volume, you know, part of their series of the Library of Tibetan Wisdom Archives. So one volume on Abhidharma, the standard kind of Abhidharma studies conducted by Tibetan seminaries. There's one main text called the Abhidharma Kosha. Abhidharma Kosha was an Abhidharma Kosha and Abhidharma Kosha Bhasham was composed by Vasubandhu, who interestingly, he he basically composed this text called Abhidhamma Kosha. So this is not even the main 7 sections. Yeah. So in the Sanskrit tradition, there are the main sections, but they don't directly look at the main sections, main text of the Abhidharma Pitaka, but a later text, which is kind of like a compendium, a further kind of distillation of all of that into one book, is called the Abhidhamma Kosha. And then Vasubandhu wrote a commentary on the text itself, whereby he actually criticizes. So he wrote this text, then he criticized it, or point out, some of the problems. And according to the usual story, it's because when he first composed this first text, his view, his understanding is still based on a particular tradition. But over time, his view evolved. We say evolve, change, however you want to talk about it. His views evolved so that he began to subscribe to a different view. So then in his commentary, his evolving views come in to kind of footnote or to clarify the earlier view that he subscribed to and compiled the Abhidhamma Kosha. Here again, before we go directly to Chodra's commentary, I think we should look at the notes section, because it's very helpful. More than any of the chapters so far, I think in this chapter, the notes provided by Professor Sobish is going to help us a lot. Yeah? So here he says, Dorshima and Rinjangma, the 2 earliest commentaries of the Gongchik, describe the critique position by referring to the Yogacara, which is the mind only. Another name for mind only, another name for Chittamatra is Yogacara. So referring to the Yogacara concept of the 3 natures. So here, Rinjangma and Dorshima will begin by saying, so first we need to understand what are these 3 natures, because in the opponent's view and in Kyopa's statement, right, basically 2 of the 3 natures is referred to. So they say, so first let's quickly refresh our memory, refresh our understanding of this concept known as the 3 natures. So what are the 3 natures? 1, that which exists unconditioned, primordially without birth and cessation, without increase and decrease, like the Dharma Dhatu, is the absolute nature. Parinishpanya. Parinishpanya, nature in Sanskrit. Then, that which one dualistically grasps within that which one dualistically grasps within that. What is that? As my, I, and mine. Imagining things as the various objects of attachment and aversion is the imagined nature. Or, translated in earlier on at the beginning of statement 5 as complete conceptualization, kunta, the imagined nature. So that's the imagined nature. Yeah. Then third, that which arises as the various pleasurable and painful results of the different virtuous and non-virtuous minds and actions is called dependent nature. So as I kind of briefly summarize, the dependent nature is, in a way you can say, the neutral aspect. They can arise, it is that which arises as either pleasurable, unpleasurable, desirable, undesirable, virtuous, non-virtuous, right? Then the imagined nature or the complete conceptualization nature is the mistaken one. Then the absolute nature or the thoroughly pure nature is the first. So Jigten Sumgön says, the creation stage belongs to number one. In response to those who say creation stage is a skillful means given to deal with the problem of number two. Yeah, again, the opposing view, right, isn't that creation stage is nonsense. It's not like, people who don't accept Vajrayana saying it. It's people who accept Vajrayana, but they say, but that, all the things that you do in the creation stage, they are like, they give the example sometimes, like, it's like when you have a splinter lodge, right, in your finger, you need another splinter or, something sharp to pull the splinter out. And once you pull the splinter out, this splinter, this thorn that you use to dislodge the thorn, both you throw away. So sometimes they say, that is like completion stage. So according to these, then, they want to say also, the completion stage, the creation stage is ultimately unnecessary when you arrive at the completion stage. So they privilege the completion stage practice. Yeah, again, like in our own situation, you can say we actually also do that. So often we say, I just want to meditate. I'm not saying that's the completion stage, but that's like a type of completion stage where you don't have to think about anything, you don't have to visualize anything, you just want to, I'm exhausted. And then you think, oh, that's actually higher. We say that's more natural, right? We even say, oh, you just pay attention to your breath, pay attention to your body, which of course Buddha taught that, But sometimes, for us, that is basically, we think, oh, that is actually superior to one face, four arms, face this color, this arm, this, that, We think, oh, that's all just, contrived. But uncontrived is when breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. You see how much we believe in this, are attached to this, and then we think, oh, this is more natural. When can we get to that? I know, some of you probably like, grudgingly tolerate, you're like, okay, let's get over there and get to the completion stage. Of course, there are some of us who like get stuck on, and also then no completion stage, But many of us, I think that creation stage is just some chore to get out of the way. So coming back to these notes, of these, only the first is considered an absolute truth, whereas the imagined and the dependent natures are relative or surface level truths. Both older commentaries agree in characterizing the general view as holding that the deity practice through the creation stage is an imagined nature. According to Rinchen Changchup, scholars generally hold that practicing, quote, practicing deities with many arms and faces is called imagined nature. Renjangma says, there are many great scholars, in the 12th century that says the creation stage in the end is working with, it's based on the imagined nature. Yeah, it's the thorn that you use to dislodge, the thorn that is pierced into your flesh. And then they further divide. They say, and here this imagined nature has two aspects, they say, which is imagined nature that lacks identity, that is totally non-existent, like a rabbit's horn. Rabbits don't have horns. Yeah. And two, the imagined nature of conceptualized forms. So this is the other view. Of these two, the practice of the different attributes like heads and arms of the deities is called imagined nature of conceptualized forms. Then the deity itself, right, independent of those arms and heads, is called imagined nature that lacks identity. And the consciousnesses, the mind that practices these imagined nature, these skillful imagined nature, is called dependent nature. So this is the third of the three natures. So according to this other view, right, they say the mind that engages in the practice is the dependent nature, the neutral nature. Right now, that neutral nature is invested in this reality. So in that sense, you could say that is the problem. How do you overcome this problem? According to this understanding, they said, then Buddha gave the skillful means of creation stage, which has two aspects. The imagined nature with conceptualized forms are all the hands and the heads and the earrings and the anklets and the skulls and the skull cup, all of that. Then the imagined nature that lacks identity is the actual deity, like the emptiness aspect. And so they say then by practicing like this, eventually you will get to the absolute nature. This is the other view. Jigten Sungun, however, continuing in the notes, maintains that the stage of cultivation, or the creation stage, is the absolute nature. That is, it is primordially existent. It is primordially present. It is primordially established. Here again, a reminder, when we say primordial in Buddhist texts, we're not really talking about, 8 billion years ago, 45 billion years ago. This is not about temporal time. This is saying now. In each moment before samsara appeared, more basic than samsara, is this primordial nature. Primordial in that sense. So Jigten Sumgön says, the creation stage, the principle, and even the details, right? They're primordially existent. His reasons for maintaining that the deity one cultivates on the path is, quote-unquote, the absolute nature, are as follows. Mantra practice, meaning Vajrayana, takes the result as the path. Therefore, those deities that we cultivate are the result, Buddhahood, which one skillfully anticipates and engages on the path. So he says, generally we all say, that Vajrayana takes the result as the path. So if the result isn't actually these Buddhas, these deities, then the path should not have anything to do with meditating on deities. But if the path is meditating on the deities and the path is actually the result, then of course these deities are the deityhood, you can say, right? The Buddhahood. Sometimes deity can get us kind of confused about what we're talking about. So the cultivated Buddhas are the result. And so on the path, the Buddhas are real. The Buddha qualities are real, in other words. Next, the practitioner's own bodily constituents and sense organs, their objects and consciousnesses, and the great elements, such as earth, wind, fire, water, which is the qualities of solidity, movement, heat, and fluidity, are identified with these deities. So again and again in the tantras, right, all these, the aggregates, the sense organs, the sense objects, sense consciousness, the material elements, they are all identified as deities. The nature of the practitioner is identical with the nature of the deity. So it's not made up. The nature and the resultant essence of the deity, namely Buddhahood, they are not different. The nature of the result exists primordially in the ground, and to take it as the path is the special dharma of the mantra vehicle. This is an elaboration of the first point. And the fifth, by believing that by cultivating a deity that does not primordially exist in the practitioner, and practicing by seeing one's own body as something impure that is to be abandoned, and the deity's body as something pure that is to be accomplished, a separate pure result cannot be obtained. So the fifth point is important. So it says that if you think, that right now you have this impure body, and that what you're doing by visualizing this pure form of the deity is to get rid of this body so that some other body is produced later. He says, practicing like this will not bring about the result. So in a way, it's a very radical, a very demanding, in fact, position to have us see how this body itself is the mandala of Buddhas. Yeah, so our relation to embodiment, there are implications to that. Anyway, going on. Regarding the latter point, Chokyi states that such an attitude is equal to the 8th and 9th fundamental transgressions of the mantra vehicle, namely to view the constituents of the physical body as ordinary and to disregard what is pure by nature, the body, as something that is impure and should be abandoned. So Chokyi says, if you hold the position, critique in point number 5 here, that actually this body is not actually deity, not actually mandala, and I'm going to now go make a new set of body and mind so that I can get rid of this, then he says you actually have broken the root transgressions of Vajrayana. Transgression 8 and 9, downfalls 8 and 9. In his remaining comments on this Vajra statement, Choki Drakpa replies to Sakya Pandita's criticism of the abrupt visualization of deities, which Sakya Pandita believes to be a Kagyu invention. So that's where the blah blah blah. Useful, when you want to when you have no choice but to answer some of Sakya Pandita's points that has been raised to challenge the Kagyu way of presenting this material, but not useful for our purposes. We're not scholars that need to defend and dispute these debate matters. Questions, comments, Sobish's notes.
I just wanted to comment that when you exchanged the word deities for Buddhas, it somehow became much more real for me. I think somehow the word deities can be loaded.
Yes.
Somewhere between like the Greek and Roman deities, and
sure.
It's confusing. So Buddhas is makes it more real.
Yeah, basically it's Buddhas.
Yeah, I have a comment about that. Sometimes we impute qualities on Buddhas that they're because of our view of them, like deity that can do anything and then can do things for us.
Yes.
So I guess that when we are really imputing or projecting on them.
Yes.
So that would be relative truth.
You could say that, but here the problem is not the main issue addressed here is not that problem. That problem is a problem. We think that they can do things for us. Here's more talking about like for most of us, our practice of the creation stage is not powerful enough because we still cannot get over thinking that only this is real. And therefore to meditate on ourselves as the Buddha of compassion with 4 arms, 1 face. That's kind of made up. So it's not just like even imputing on Avalokiteshvara out there, but even to impute, like, or to project like, I'm Avalokiteshvara. But then somewhere back there's a voice that says, no, you're not. You're just making yourself, you're just faking it. I like the notion of faking it until you make it. But Kyoba says, actually, you're not faking it. What you've been faking is this other identity. Antonio, Han, Adriana, Fabiola. That's what you've been faking. And you've been practicing that fake creation stage all throughout your stay in samsara. That's what you have been creating. That's what you have been fabricating.
Okay. Like you are seeing the dependent nature directly.
What do you mean? I don't
understand. Like you're realizing that the deity and the mandala are the dependent nature. that they lack the imaginate nature. They are actually
Whose view are you talking about now?
like when you are in the generation stage or the cultivation stage, you are taking away the imputed nature that we have on the dependent nature, and realizing that this is what's happening, that really they are mandala, they are deities. We are mandala and deity.
Hold on, let's back up. When you say this, right? Before, I don't quite understand yet what you're saying, but before you even try to explain more, whose view are you reproducing here? Yopa's view or the other view? What are you trying to clarify first? So explain that.
Yeah, like the Chicken Sun's view, like ordinary
Okay,
world.
so you want to explain, you want to clarify, is this Jigten Sumgun's view, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so now tell us what you think Jigten Sumgun's view is.
Well, that we see the world in a certain way.
Yes.
That is like the imagined way. And the world.
Yes,
actually,
right now, the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, that's the imagined nature.
Okay. And when we're doing like the creation stage, we are actually visualizing the world as it is.
Yes, that's the absolute nature.
Even as we don't see it as we ordinarily see it in our confused way.
Meaning, like in the creation stage that is not stable yet, we still need to put great effort, right? In reminding ourselves. Yes.
Okay. We need practice.
Yeah. And that is the absolute nature. Yeah. And the fact that we don't habitually see it that way yet is not because it is not like that. It's because we are so fixated to our imagined nature. Hun is this is Hun's world, this is Hun's house, this is Hun's position and significance in the world, all of that.
Okay.
And he says, and if we then, now we say, okay, I'm going to practice the creation stage. And he says, oh, that's good. But he says, but don't practice the creation stage by still making accommodations for the imagined nature that you're so enslaved to, and then try to kind of, in a way you could say, try to not shock your system by intellectually telling your system, actually, hey, by the way, you know, those 8 arms, those 3 faces, they're not really real. It's just, you know, you're working with. Yeah, we're just working with that as a skillful way. Because we don't want to disrupt our narrative of who we are. Even if intellectually we say, oh, I want to, you know, transform my narrative, my self-image, but we're fundamentally still finding ways to prop that up. By even, you know, like coming up with sophisticated ways of like taming the radical vision of creation stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what we need to, of course, ask, like given our context, our situation, it's like, so does this mean there are anklets and armlets and earrings? Like literally? Yeah. Good question. Legitimate question. Like thousand arm, thousand eye Chinese, Like, you mean like someday I'm going to walk down the street and, Chinese is going to come up the street with that? Does it mean that when it says it's the creation stage is absolute nature? Does it mean that? Don't be too quick to answer. Don't be too quick to intellectualize and say, well, it means that, but it doesn't really mean that. Because then now it's, again, we're trying to kind of tame the radical and shocking statements of Tantra and put them into neat folders, that we then collate and put on our shelf, and we say, I got it. So let it remain a little kind of like unnerving, like, really? Like, did he say that one day you're going to walk on the street and, across the street, you're going to see like thousand generously walking up to you? And now, of course, the next moment you're like, no, that cannot be the case. Also here is saying, don't so quickly think that cannot be the case. Yeah, so that creative tension, surely you don't mean, a white-colored seven-eye lady is going to come up and knock on my door and say, hello, I'm White Tara, how are you today? So on one level, we want to say, well, surely you don't mean that. But then don't be so quick to say, oh yeah, surely I don't mean that. Because when we do that, then we basically are reinforcing our current narrative of what is and what isn't. Part of the power of the generation stage, the creation stage, is to shock, is to disturb, is to agitate our current narrative. And if we too quickly try to tame it, collate it, file it, collate it, alphabetize it, then I think we are not relating to these teachings in the way that they were given, and they won't work so well. Yeah?
Yes. Never lose the power of amazement.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. To disrupt again our cherished narratives of me, mine, my world, my society, my Chanchu semchu rinpoche magye banam ge gyurje ge banyam ba me bayang gong ne gong du be war So an announcement about, of course, Dugong Dhamma Kirti, for those of you who are able to participate. We are going to start our first meeting of the year this Wednesday. And with the new year, as I mentioned before, I ask that we become more intentional about participating in Dugong Dhamma Kirti. So that one announcement. Then the second announcement is, so my plan is to offer a longer weekend program every end of the month for the next few months. So the first one would be the end of January, that weekend. And the basic program will start like on Saturday morning. So this is not going to work obviously for people who are in Malaysia, because then it's through the night when you are asleep where the program is happening. But I suppose you could get recordings of it later on if you want to. But each of these end of the month programs are going to be hosted and run by different units, different organizations that I often teach at. So some would be, one of them would be by Urban Dharma. Then there's more flexibility, then it's the usual way we do things. But the first one, end of January, is going to be hosted by the EBS in Little Rock, Arkansas, the Ecumenical Buddhist Society. So when I have information from them on how to register and what is involved in the registration and all of that, I will pass on that information. I will post it, So if you want to participate, you look for it. The typical program is going to start on Saturday, I think 10 o'clock our time. It's 9 o'clock their time. They are in Central Time. And so it's 9 o'clock their time, and it will go to 5 or something like that. So 6 o'clock our time. So it's basically all day Saturday, and then Sunday it will only be half day. It will end at around 1 or 2 New York time. Again, it'll start at 9, 10, something like that. So we'll work out the details. So the gist of it is that it's going to be all day Saturday and then half of Sunday. At the end of February, I'm pretty sure, but the details I don't have yet, is going to be an event hosted by Mexico City Tibet House. That's a program on Dambala. So, this first program is going to, the title is end of January. The title is called what did I say it was going to be? The title is called Buddhist Teachings on Life, Death, In Between and Beyond. Yeah, so more description details will be coming out soon. Then the end of February, it will be on Dambala. And it's the teaching about generosity, openness of heart, and all of that. And then the end of March will be something that probably it's Urban Dharma that's going to be hosting that. And then end of April will be another unit hosting. So they're all going to be at the end of the month. Just for your planning purposes, if you would like to attend any or all of these, you should kind of take note. Yeah. Okay, Tata.
Thank you.